Learn the most empowering hiring techniques. Land the most desirable talent. Launch your company towards massive success. This is the Higher Power Radio Show with your host, Rick Gerard.
All right, now we've all heard the phrase that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. Now, this truth is supported by data from Gallop, which 75% of over 1 million workers surveyed left because of their bosses, not the work or the company. So how do we combat this? First, let's train our managers. Second, let's do a better job of hiring people who will align with the values of the company and the manager, setting both parties up for success and ensuring the company's forward momentum. I'm Rick Gerard, and welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show. We help entrepreneurs and executives win the strongest people by sharing insights from top-performing rebel entrepreneurs, game changers, and industry leaders like our guest today, Mr. Phillip Thune. He's the CEO of Thune. Now, he's been involved in the tech startup and online search sectors for over 20 years and is a proven leader in ad tech and digital media space. Thune is an award-winning search intelligence platform to help brands, marketers, and agencies dominate their competitive landscapes. Now, what's cool about Phillip is he's a values-driven leader who has helped scale 4 different companies from early stages, including FindWhat.com, which went from $500K in revenue and 35 employees when he joined to over 200 million and 500 employees with a market cap of over 700 million, which is what makes Phillip the perfect expert for today's topic. Phillip, welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show.
Thanks, Rick. Nice to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. We're going to tackle the topic of turnover today. And I believe that turnover in the first year, especially when you hire people, is totally avoidable. It's been my experience that it's caused by 3 things. 1, the leadership's pain, like the need to stop the pain. Like we just had somebody leave, which became a big surprise. And so we got to scramble really quickly and just get somebody to do the work. 2, maybe it's a planned hire and the process is rushed. You've talked to a lot of people, you haven't really quite found the right person. And then all of a sudden it's like, you know what, this position's been open for too long. Let's just hire the next body who was willing to take the job. And then the third thing is assumptive decision-making. Now, this usually happens with referrals. So Johnny made a referral to me. Let's just assume that Johnny knows this person. It's probably a pretty good person. So we're just going to shortcut the interview process and hire him. I don't know if you've seen the same thing. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with that, right? I think turnover is so expensive in so many different ways that, taking an extra month or sometimes an extra 2 months, 3 months, if that means you hire the right person and that person sticks around, that's worth the pain because it can be painful, right? We've had pretty much every company I've been at where people are just screaming for more support. Can we hire more people? I'm working too hard. I'm missing things. So it's that kind of short-term pain, which is the thing right in front of you. You want to fix as soon as possible, but you got to balance that with, bringing in somebody who's going to last for 4 months. And then you have to do the whole process all over again. Just not worth it.
Share a story that, you've dealt with that's in and around that.
Well, I think, you started out by mentioning that one of the largest reasons people leave their jobs is their manager. And there's definitely others, right? So people, sometimes they need a change. Let's say they have been with the company for a long time and they feel like they're just kind of getting stuck. So they need a change. Compensation comes up, right? I've found that most people, if not all people, are never all that happy with their compensation, which I actually think is a good thing, right? If you have somebody in the chair who's like, oh, I'm being overpaid, right? There's probably something wrong there, right? So it's a thing you have to deal with and you have to be really respectful of because it determines, right, how your team lives their lives. But in a weird way, it's a good thing, right? So, there's a long list of reasons that people might start looking for another job. And I think some of what we'll talk today about is, how do you get in front of that? How do you make sure you're aware of that so that you can kind of address it before it becomes a problem? The whole goal that I've always had with all these various companies is I want people to feel comfortable, telling us that they have an issue, that there's something that's making them unhappy. Because if they do that, then we have a chance to fix it before we get into all those things of somebody leaving with 2 weeks notice, and then you can't find somebody, that whole thing.
Change is also a reason too. Usually when somebody new comes in at a very high level, It's your job to rock the boat a little bit, right? So I would imagine that that's going to be kind of a normal thing. Any story you can share there?
Yeah, my approach, because I've now done this several times, right? I'm a huge fan of founders and entrepreneurs. And I've been a co-founder and an entrepreneur, but more of my career has been joining a company that's already gone from kind of 0 to 1 or 0 to 2. And I come in to try to kind of help it go to the next level. And so my approach there is, day one, first few months even, is actually don't try to change anything right away. And Athena was an interesting example. They do a lot of things that I had never done before. I don't know if people who listen in know about OKRs and that whole kind of framework of trying to move a company forward. I had done things similar, but I'd never used that vocabulary. There was a certain style of meetings and cadence of meetings, both at the executive level and at other levels. I didn't change any of that when I came in. And actually, it's now a little bit over a year later. I haven't changed any of that. So there are definitely things that we did change, but you kind of want to come in and see what's working. Keep the things that are working because everybody's used to that. So why would you make somebody revolve around something I did in a previous job? That doesn't make sense. So if something's working, keep that. It's working well. I'll figure out how to join along. And then there's with things that aren't working. Yeah, you want to change those as quickly as you can.
A lot of things get overlooked, right? So I would imagine that you were able to uncover some people that weren't performing to the standards of what your expectations were, or maybe people got nervous because they didn't want you to find that.
No, Athena, I've been kind of fortunate, right? I think the team I came into was a really good one. There have been people who have kind of left the team since, some their choice, some was sort of our choice. But that's another one. And I probably err on the side of giving people second chances, third chances, going back to the point you made at the very beginning, because changing somebody out can be so painful, trying to look for that new person. So that was my mindset coming in. And again, I got lucky that this team is pretty good, and especially at the executive level. We had one executive depart 3 weeks after I started. But yes, since then, everybody else on the executive team has been great, and are people that I kind of really want to keep together, because you lose so much momentum when you make that change. And frankly, I'm the new CEO, right? So there was a change at CEO. So you got to kind of let people sort of settle through that change, because that's about as big a change as you can have from a personnel perspective.
All right, you're listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. For our podcast listeners, we're going to take a quick educational moment from our sponsors.
Welcome to the Hire Her podcast, where women in talent call all the shots. We know, another recruiting podcast, just what the industry needs. Okay, but hear us out. You ever spend hours sourcing that perfect candidate, but they end up ghosting you harder than your hinge date? Or finally, you get that hiring manager feedback, only for them to, of course, say, "Can we see more candidates?" Lame, right? But let's talk about what's really lame in the industry. How is it that 65% of recruiters are brilliant women, yet most of the decision makers look like a convention for middle-aged dudes named Brad?
That's where we come in. Hire Her isn't just another podcast about hiring trends you already heard like 50 times this week. We're here to elevate women in talent, share their career journeys, and make sure they take the lead. Because let's face it, if recruiting is the backbone of every company, why are we still fighting for a seat at the table? So whether you're a recruiter, a talent leader, or just someone trying to swim through the sausage fest of TA leadership, we got you, girl. Welcome to Hire Her, the recruiting podcast where women's voices aren't just heard, but they're leading the conversation.
So subscribe now, because middle management Brad sure as hell isn't going to do it for you.
Hey, I'm digging in deeper with my guest, Phillip Thune. He is the CEO of Adventa, and we're talking about his journey in taking ownership of a new company. What is this, your fourth?
Fifth.
I love it. He's going to hopefully rub off some of that magic that he has. How do you solve the problem of attrition?
Right. So I think that the number one thing I mentioned before is understanding what reasons people might have to start looking for a new job. Sure. So when I first started at Thune, I think it was either my first or my second all hands call. We have a monthly call, go over sort of how the company's doing, lots of things. So I kind of rolled out these sort of, not really rules, but things we want Athena to live by, we want managers to live by. One of them I call the don't quit rule. Okay. And what that really means is don't quit without talking to us first. For that rule to work, you really need to kind of live it. You need team members to feel like there will be no repercussions. I'm sure we all know stories of people who work at jobs and they're like, God, if I told my manager I was thinking of quitting, I'd be out the door so fast, they'd never give me a second thought. But we want to be the opposite of that, right? We want to be an open dialogue where you're telling us how you're feeling, you're telling us where you want your career to go. And we're not just listening, we're trying to figure out, can we meet those needs? So one example, the last company I was at, somebody we had was great at marketing. That's the role we hired him for. And they said, look, I've got a young child. I got another one on the way. I know I'm going to want to send him to private school, and the compensation I make right now in this role just won't cut it. So that was awesome because they didn't need to pay for private school next month or next year. They were kind of thinking, longer term. And the great news is they were thinking about staying at our company longer term. And so my suggestion there was, hey, you know what? I think you'd be good at sales. And if you're not good at sales, you're actually going to make less money than you make now. But if you're good at sales, you're going to make significantly more money than you do in your current job. Plus, this person had aspirations of one day being a COO or CEO. And I was like, you know what? Having been in the sales role is just super, super helpful if you eventually want to be in sort of a higher management position. So they were willing to try it. Because we had that conversation, we obviously needed to replace him on the marketing side. But because we had that conversation, it was a very smooth transition. He kind of was doing half and half for a while until we found his replacement. He was able to train the replacement, and then he was able to go full bore into sales. And the postscript did great. And he's actually now in a CEO position, having been, still at that same company.
Sparking two things. One, communication, being open to hearing these things, right? And I find that most managers, and this is what I was hitting on at the very top when I started talking about people quit their managers, most managers take it personal and they get angry about it. I don't understand why you wouldn't be happy. Yes, it's an oh shit moment. But at the same time, if you're planning for this attrition, hey, look, can you give me X amount of time? What can we do to get your position filled and have you trained up on them? A transition phase rather than, okay, complete your work and leave. When that happens, you're just missing out on a lot of really good things that could happen.
Or imagine we didn't have that rule, and imagine I had treated that conversation differently. I was like, you know what? We need you to be the marketing person. Yeah, I'm sorry. Marketing can only pay so much. That's all we have. Within days, I guarantee that person would have been out looking for other jobs, right? They might not have even thought of the sales avenue, but they would have probably looked for higher paying marketing jobs, right? Because you're not addressing this major need that they said they have. And the great thing was that they gave us so much time to kind of work through it. So I think it is open communication is the key. I'm one of those people who loves feedback. So we have anonymous questions. We have employee satisfaction surveys. We have as many different ways as we can come up with where if you have a problem, you can feel like you can voice it, even if you don't want anybody to know it's you. But ideally with your direct manager should know what your career aspirations are, know where you want to go, and sort of be working with how that can happen either at the company I'm at, or this is key. This is a big part of that don't quit rule. Or is the promise is, look, if we can't get you what you want at this company, we will do everything we can to help you get it at the next company. We'll scour our network to find openings that might fit. We'll write you letters of recommendation. We'll be available for any reference checks. There is no downside, right? Either we're going to solve the problem and you're going to stay here and you're going to be happy, or we're going to sort of smoothly find, again, you're never going to get like fired the next day. We're going to figure out some transition plan for you to have some time to go find the next thing that's outside. And I've had this case, right, where Thune is a company with about 20 million in revenue. We're still startup-ish, but we've been around for 12 years. You're not going to learn how to raise venture capital financing and sort of hire your first few team members at Thune. So if that's your dream, if your dream is to be an entrepreneur and you want to start a startup, that's a career path I can't offer you at Thune. But if you tell us that, we can start to expose you to certain things. And again, I've done this. I had a call earlier today with somebody who said that. They're like, hey, I want to know about this stuff. So I had half an hour. All we did was talk about how it works and how I've done it in the past, just sort of preparing somebody so that we can make that smooth transition when they feel like the time is right.
So this is what you call your Sherpa plan, right?
Yeah. So the don't quit rule is don't quit without talking to us first. What our people team did, and they were working on this actually before I started, is what we call Sherpa plans. So a Sherpa plan is a meeting once or twice a year between a manager and somebody on their team. It's a structured conversation trying to understand what somebody's career aspirations are, but it's also about developing a ladder and a path within Athena in every department. So we actually have a slide that if you're in the customer team and you're team leader, you know what the next step is. You know what the step is after that. You know what the step is after that. And we have a track for somebody who wants to be a manager, and we have a track for somebody who wants to be an individual contributor. So if somebody's like, I like what I do. I don't want to manage people. That's not where I want to go. Well, you still want to be able to progress your career. You still want to be able to progress within your department. So we make it super clear what those positions are. They all have titles, and we have a list of, hey, this is what we need to see from somebody who's going to fill that position. So you already know 2-3 steps down the line the skills that you should be building if that's where you want your career to go.
We talk a lot about attrition these days. People that you're keeping there staying because you're providing them a growth path. And you're saying, hey, look, we've got that. As a headhunter, I've found that most of the reason why I was able to recruit people out of companies and place them in another company is because they didn't have a growth path. Nobody really cared about what was in it for them. And it was very easy to have these conversations with people who are like, look, I've been here for 2, 3, 5 years. My managers never talked to me about where I want to go. And I'm just going through the hamster wheel. I'm just doing the same thing over and over again. And I'm not seeing a growth path here. You'd be surprised at how many people from my side as a recruiter have told me, like, money's not even that important. Fostering a growth path for somebody and you're helping them plan their exit, their graduation, so to speak. Why shouldn't they have that experience?
Yeah, no, and again, that sort of openness and transparency, I find compensation, because like I said, right, like nobody seems to ever be happy with their compensation. So one of the things we will talk about, if that is what's driving you, if you do have young kids who have to go to private school in a few years, we'll tell you how much you'll make at those higher, those other positions along the ladder. Again, going back to that example I used of the person who went from marketing to sales, I think that's really helpful for somebody. Like, again, some people, money is really a motivator. It's really a factor, and they've got sort of some numbers in their head. And if that's what drives them, then you have to listen, or they're going to leave anyway, right? It's like just ignoring the problem is not solving it. They're just going to leave you with like 1 week notice or 2 weeks notice. So I do find that's interesting that you say compensation sometimes the last. I find like it's always one of the more important. I think it's not as important as kind of liking your manager, because no amount of money sometimes is enough to deal with somebody you can't stand. But no, money and compensation is typically up there. And I think if you're going to implement something like we're trying to implement here, I think you've got to be pretty transparent about what the various levels pay. Not enough for somebody, then either we help them find something outside the company, or maybe they could move within the company to a different department that pays more.
What I've experienced is that when you tell a company you're leaving, easy way to get out, people tend to kind of like, what's the path of least resistance to me telling my manager that I have to leave? Well, the XYZ company made me a huge offer. I'm going to go take it because I need more money. But I don't think it's the reason why they start looking most of the time.
Interesting. Yeah, I think part of what one of the other kind of rules, I think, that sort of goes along with this is, you kind of should be paying people fairly. Part of the don't quit rule, which, as you can imagine, right? So, and we've had this, right? Recently, if somebody comes to us and says, hey, look, I'm making X and I just got an offer from a headhunter, or I've been looking and they're offering me 20% more. Will you match it? First of all, we're going to say, well, you didn't follow the don't quit rules. So our conversation is not going to go as smoothly as you think it's about to. Number one. And number two, it's like, no, we're not going to match it. If you want to understand how you can make 20% more at Athena, we are absolutely ready to have that conversation. It's not going to be tomorrow. So if it's really important that you have 20% more in your paycheck starting next week, maybe you should take that job. But we're never going to be in a case where somebody says, hey, somebody just made me an offer 20% more. Will you match it? The answer is no. We're paying you what we think is fair. We think you have lots of room to grow. We can point you to how you're going to get there, but it's not going to be because some other company is offering you.
When you presented this don't quit rule initially, how did that go?
It was a little tricky. So I talked about it. And then unfortunately, based on where the company was, we actually had to downsize a bit. So we sort of, unfortunately, about 6 people, we sort of let them go and just didn't fill those positions. I didn't think that kind of message goes over all that well when you're asking people to leave, right? If we're sort of saying, hey, don't quit, but we're going to ask you to leave. And the downsizing is painful because those 6 people were all good people and it wasn't their fault, right? Sometimes we ask people to leave because they're not getting the job done, right? And that's fair enough. But when you do downsizing, then it's not their fault. And so it's really hard to have this don't quit, but we might ask you to leave kind of thing. So I backed off of it. And then we implemented the Sherpa plans kind of second half of last year. I thought it was going well. We didn't have very much attrition or people leaving in Q3 or Q4. So in my head, I'm like, okay, I mentioned the don't quit rule. We have the Sherpa plans. We're starting to roll them out. I think we're in good shape. And then Q1 of this year, so not that long ago, I think we had a series of 4 or 5 people just kind of left, didn't tell us any. They're just like, hey, I'm leaving 2 weeks notice. And so good slap in the face for me, like, hey, you need to re-emphasize this. You need to reintroduce it. You need to make sure people understand what we're talking about, why it's helpful for them, why it's helpful for us. So we kind of had to almost restart it.
Now, are you having people that are coming to you and having conversations?
We are. Yeah, we are. It's actually funny. I always, again, open door. Anybody in the company can book time with me. I try to proactively ask people to book time with me just so I can kind of stay up to date. I think crucial in a remote first company. You don't get those sort of just easy conversations walking down the hall. But yeah, I've had a few people. It's funny. I've had a few people who want to talk to me about what they want with their career. And the very first thing they say is, look, I'm not thinking about quitting. Right. So they start. So you kind of, when people start repeating back kind of the thing you're trying to message, then you have a sense that, okay, maybe people are listening.
Here's what I like about this is that you've created a safe environment for open communication, which is super important for any organization. But also, you guys have made it pretty well known that you're not going to take anything personal. And let's work together on getting this worked out. Kudos to you. This is really cool stuff. I've had other people that have talked about boomerang hires, where they've had people that have left the company, they've graduated out, they went into another company and realized, oh crap, this other place I was at was pretty great. And they might spend a year or two at another company, but then another role opens up, move into a different role, and it becomes a very easy reintroduction. And
right. And I think Athena's had that in the past. Ideally, somehow you can make that transition. We had somebody who was there in the pretty early days, was on the customer team, dealing with customer service kind of stuff, told us, and this was, again, way before me, way before the don't quit rule or the Sherpa plan. So it's good that this was happening at Athena before we made it formal. But she was on the customer team. She kind of wanted to be a data scientist. So our tech team kind of started mentoring her, telling her about like classes she should be taking, things she should be looking at. And today she's on our data science team. Those transitions should be possible if you're listening without somebody having to go, leave the company for 2 or 3 years. But obviously that happens too. People leave and then come back.
So we're getting pretty close on time, Phillip. What would be 2 or 3 key takeaways you can give the audience that can plug into the business today?
I think the thing that I want Athena team members to believe is like, this company is weirdly obsessed with my career as much as my parents or my spouse. So I think if you can get that across to your team, I promise you that the benefits will be, you are going to have situations where you just can't get that person what they want at your company. Like I said, their dream has been to do a startup from scratch. Okay, well, do everything you can to help them and follow through on that. It's just good karma, but it's just been amazing to me in my career, like how often sort of that good environment sort of does come back and help you. They recommend the company to somebody they know, or I don't know, I've had people who I've done that for, and then years later, they're like a customer. Like I reach out and I was like, hey, I just joined this Athena company. I think you might be a good customer of ours. I'm like, oh, great. Because that experience 10 years ago was so good and I kind of helped them or the team helped them, they're happy to help us or consider it. So yeah, I think that's the number one takeaway is I think if you can create your company as a place that is weirdly obsessive about the career growth of your team, it's going to make a lot of things better.
Phillip, thanks so much for your time investment today. And I want to welcome you to the Higher Power Radio community. Now, what would be the best way in which members of the audience can reach you or find you?
Yeah, I'd be happy if people want to reach out. I think the best way is just reach out on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Phillip Thune on LinkedIn. I'm certainly the only Phillip Thune at Athena on LinkedIn.
Very cool. And you have a podcast as well, right?
I did. I used to be a competitor. Used to be a competitor of yours, but yeah, that was at my last company.
No competitors. We're all colleagues. All right. So thank you for tuning in this week's episode of Higher Power. Quick thanks to our team, Brian Colburn, Andrea Ballin, and Ayla Gerard. Please subscribe, review, and share this podcast. We're listening. We welcome your feedback on a weekly basis. After all, this show's for you. You can join the Higher Power Radio community at Higher, H-I-R-E, Power, P-O-W-E-R, radio, R-A-D-I-O.com, or you can reach out to me at rick@innertrue.ai. I'm your host, Rick Girard, and you have been listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. Aloha.
Thank you for listening to Higher Power Radio. Catch our LinkedIn Live show every Tuesday at noon or download the podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform. We appreciate you joining us on Higher Power Radio with your guide to hiring success, Rick Girard.